こんにちは。アドテック東京公式チャンネルアドちゃんです。本日も MC を務めますフリーチです。よろしくお願いします。さて、今日のアドちゃんはですね、越境ライブということで海外ゲストに来ていただいています。去年のアドテック東京のキーノートにも登壇したウェットセメント社のジェニファー・ウィリーと今中継しております。新型コロナによる現在の米国東海岸の状況を現地マーケティングコンサルタントにインタビューという形でこちらのアジェンダに沿って進めたいと思います。アジェンダの方出ますでしょうか。はい、ありがとうございます。彼女、日本にも4回来日しておりまして、日本の業界情報にも精通しておりますので、現状に加え、日本で有効なことについても聞いていきたいと思います。では、早速、ここからすいません。あと、全編英語になりますので、後日、日本語でレポートも出しますが、これから先のセッションすべて英語になります。よろしくお願いします。さて、では早速、セッションの方に参りたいと思います。Hello, Jen!
Hello there. I'm so happy to be here with you.
How are you doing?
We're okay here. I am in New Jersey in the United States. So we are the second most impacted area. And we're right next to New York, which is most impacted. That's actually where my husband works and goes in to New York City every day. He's on the front lines in the news business. And so we are just trying to stay as positive and focused on the long term and what life will be like once we come through this.
Great. I'm totally the same situation right now. Thank you. And thank you for your time today. And we really appreciate that you will be sharing your situation. So we are eager to know what's happening in the United States right now. So let's move to the first topic. So could you tell me about how's the US government supporting?
Yeah, so as it relates to the US government supporting companies, so for my company, Wet Cement, and our gender equality practice, Advanced Women at Work, we are a small business. And so one of the first measures that the US government took to help small businesses was they created a series of programs that incentivized companies to not lay off their employees and to not close down. And so they created a program called the Payroll Protection Program, which means you could get a loan that was worth 2 months worth of salary for your entire organization if you were a small business. And as long as you didn't cut the payroll or what you were paying people substantially or have layoffs on top of that, at the end of that 2-month period, you could put in a request to have that loan forgiven, which means that essentially it turns from a loan into a grant so that you wouldn't owe that money back. Now, I'm thrilled we have one of those, but I will say that there's been a lot of issues just in terms of trying to turn around a giant program like that very quickly. We saw that there were pretty large companies in the United States that had gotten these payroll protection loans in the millions of dollars per company. And so there were apparently some loopholes in there. Some of those large companies, once they got found out, have returned the money. But what they found was that very quickly, all the money that was assigned for that payroll protection program had been extinguished. So I'm happy to say a few weeks later, the government has now issued another round of funding for that program. And so we will see how that goes here. So the government is very much focused on how can they help businesses stay intact, also from an unemployment perspective. So here in the United States, if you lose your job for any reason that's not your own fault, you can apply to get unemployment, which is a certain amount of money every week based on what your salary is. And they've made exceptions to that where they're also providing additional funding beyond what they would normally provide for unemployment to help close that gap, because we have seen a tremendous spike of people losing their jobs, and unemployment has gone through the roof over the course of the past 6 weeks. Where I am in New Jersey alone, last year, this week, we had 86,000 unemployment people apply or file for unemployment. Last year, 86,000. This year, 880,000.
Wow.
So it is pretty substantial, the impact to the economy that we have here.
Wow, thank you. And you mostly feel happy about that government support right now?
I feel like the government is
うん、
trying to help
う
and to
ん、
bridge the gap. I think it's hard for any government to be prepared
う
for
ん、
something of this magnitude and this scale. And I think that it will only continue to be problematic with time. We are seeing problems now in the United States with the food industry.
うん、
That because it's different than in Japan. So you still have restaurants open. Where we live, restaurants are not open for dining in.
うん、
Some restaurants have stayed open where they have started takeout service, but you can't go and sit in a restaurant here anymore. So the vast majority of restaurants have closed down because they know that they can't have a viable business just through takeout. And so, because of that, the food suppliers and the farmers and the meat industry, they don't have the supply chain
うん、
to get the food to the people because they're typically selling through the commercial supply chain. And so we have stories of um, whether it's farmers raising livestock and cows, or farmers who are
うん、
growing plants and fruits and vegetables here that are literally having to kill the animals and bury them, or just bury the vegetables because they have nowhere to put it.
うん、
So it's so extensive here, and I think it will continue to get worse. That there are steps being made, but I don't think anyone's ever going to be, I would say, happy
うん、
with the situation
Yes.
because there have definitely been challenges
うん、う
in
ん。
terms of what's happened so far.
Okay, thank you so much. And then we'd like to move to the next topic, which is how do you think the business trends that you mentioned already, but United States would change from COVID-19 impacts?
Sure. So some of the trends that we're seeing here are that I would say the companies who will survive and thrive through this are the ones who are really getting creative about how do they pivot their business, or how do they transform their business in some way so that they can still stay viable. They can still continue to serve their customers in some way. And so I'll give you an example of some of those things. So some companies that used to be event companies, very similar to Comexposium and AdTech, they are thinking about creating new models. So it might be a membership model
うん、
where they are creating virtual support groups to connect and have folks within the industry network and support each other. We're seeing companies that are even like, if it was a painting studio or a craft studio where you would go in and paint a picture, that they are now selling groups of their products, bundling their products, and you can pick it up and they'll put it in your car, or you can just drive by or walk by and grab it. And then they'll do instruction via YouTube or Zoom or any of the other video conferencing platforms where you can do that at home. We're seeing the same thing with fitness centers and gyms here in the United States, where they're creating online streaming at-home workout programs. So there's a lot of ways that companies are trying to get creative about how do they thrive and stay relevant in this economy. The other thing that a lot of companies are doing is thinking about how do you get creative about lowering your costs during
う
this
ん、
time. So certainly there are some who just shut their doors, or who furloughed, which is in the United States, furloughing is telling employees that they have to stop working for several weeks. They won't get paid, but they still get their benefits. So they might say, we're furloughing employees for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. But then there are other companies who are coming up with a number of different ways to get creative, how they can keep their talent, keep their business intact. For example, I've spoken to several companies where they've said everyone has taken a pay cut. So everyone has taken a reduction in their compensation by 20%, or everyone is now working on a part-time schedule. So they'll have everyone working 3 days a week, or they'll be doing job shares, which was popular in the United States about 30, 40 years ago, where two people will be doing the same job. So one person will do it for 1 week, the other person will do it for the next week, or they will alternate days. So that would be my recommendation for companies, to really think about what are all of the different possibilities so that you can stay in business, but also keep the talent you have. Because if you do get into a situation where you are in a lockdown in Japan, which I hope is not the case, but you then will see businesses who will just say, I'm not going to be able to stay in business, or I'll get rid of all of my employees so that I can, not be responsible for paying for their salaries. There's better ways, and there's different ways that you can get creative.
How about marketing industry that you engaged in? Is there any big change or?
Oh yeah,
movements?
so absolutely. Thanks for asking about that. So we've been doing a lot of work. One of my big partners in the United States is the association that represents all of the digital out-of-home media companies. And so we've been doing a number of webinars to help support the entire marketing and ad tech community. So we have everything from the tech suppliers to the advertising agencies to the brands, you name it, involved in those. And what we're seeing, so I did a webinar earlier this week. We had 400 people register for a webinar around negotiations, because that is one of the things that's top of mind for everyone right now as people are negotiating contracts, because there has been pauses in the media schedules and media campaigns across the board. I've spoken to leaders at Google and Facebook, amongst many other large media companies and tech companies in the United States. And they are sharing with me, now granted, what the press releases may say could tell a different story, but they have shared that they are just dealing with vast pauses in campaigns where people are just completely stopping their campaigns. I even heard about one major company that is one of the largest coffee chains, retail coffee chains in the United States, where they just said, we have to cancel our marketing efforts for the entire remainder of the year, because they need to take that money back so they can have some money to give to all of their franchises. So it has hit this industry hard, especially anything where it's out of home. Certainly if it's the marketing industry that's online, where people are spending a tremendous amount of time now. If you're talking about OTT, over-the-top services or streaming services, they're seeing a huge influx. Obviously, the YouTubes of the world. Facebook just announced here in the United States this week that they have seen a tremendous impact as it relates to user engagement over the course of the last 4 weeks. But regardless, even if there's greater user engagement, many of those brands right now don't have the funds to be able to support the ad campaign. So I've been hearing from so many folks I know in the ad tech, marketing, and media industry who have been negatively impacted in a pretty substantial way, where either their entire department or division has closed down, they've been laid off, they've been asked to reduce their salary by 50%, but also take on the job at the same time of doing another person's job in addition to their own. So it's really tough here.
Yes, thank you so much for a case study. I know it's very bad situation right now, but what do you see as the positive aspect due to the coronavirus?
Yeah, yes. I'm so glad that you asked that, because that is a lot of the work that I am focusing on through the work that I do. And that is really helping people think about what is the good coming out of this that you want to keep with you, even when the governments say, okay, it's safe to go back to work. And one of the things that I see most here is this social connection. People are recognizing that everyone was running too fast and working too hard, and not prioritizing those things in life that really matter, and not taking the time to say, oh gosh, well, my good friend or my grandmother lives in another state or for you prefecture, and I can't spend time with them in person and I miss them. Well, now everyone is using technology to stay connected and realizing how important it is to carve out that time to do that. We're even seeing, like in my neighborhood where I live, I go for walks with my dog every day. And before this, I would never see other people on the street, ever. Maybe other people occasionally walking their dogs. Now it is, you walk outside on a nice day and the streets are filled with people walking, riding bikes, talking to each other from a safe distance, 6 feet away, but just there's this sense of community that I hope stays with us.
Yes, it's same situation in Japan, I think. Yes. And I think we run too fast and we never think about our life, and also for the companies, we never think about the future or brand purpose, but now we have time. So I think it's a good time for lean back and rethink about why we are doing this business and our brand purpose as well.
I couldn't agree more. Don't let this opportunity to identify how you can learn and grow and iterate or evolve from this. Don't let that slip through your hands and just at the end of it say, okay, back to work as usual. Because I really think that the companies who just go back to the old way will not only will their customers be less interested, but they'll lose valuable talent because employees want to work in a place that is connected and cares about their people, but they also feel like they can live a full life.
Thank you. And then we'd like to move to the last topic. I think it is very interesting to our audience as well. So tell me about any advice to the Japanese companies suffering from extended self-restraint period.
Sure. So one of the first things I would say is to make sure that you are keeping your teams connected. So the best companies are those that are putting a regular schedule in place where they're leveraging video conference capabilities, even if it's for folks on their team who would never normally be in a meeting or a video conference, so that they can stay connected and be able to feel like there's still a company culture. So that, because one thing that we are seeing in the United States is that mental health, depression, anxiety, and other issues is really expected to rise. So one thing that in US history has been seen is that for every 1% increase in unemployment, you see a 1% increase in the suicide rate.
Oh,
so
wow, that's pretty high.
It is very high, and considering that our unemployment rate has gone up, at least in New Jersey, by 10 times over the last year, that's a big concern. So the more you can keep your team connected is very important, both from a cultural standpoint, but you now have the opportunity to give folks who may not have been comfortable bringing their most innovative and creative ideas to the table before, to think about how you can pivot and expand your business or come up with new services or align with other similar types of companies with potentially a joint venture that would have both of you becoming stronger by sharing resources in some way. Based on the typical ways businesses operate, these kinds of ideas may not have been able to surface in the past. But now, if you can give everyone a voice and really encourage people to come up with those most creative ideas, and through technology, it becomes really easy to do that. So you can, if you're leading a meeting, you can do things like being really thoughtful and conscious about how are you using chat, or how are you using polls in video conference tools? How can you allow people to weigh in and use data visualization so you can very clearly see what the masses of your organization think? There's a a tool in the US. I don't know if it's in Japan just yet, but it may be, called Mentimeter, Mentimeter. I'll send you the link.
Thank you.
Makes it very easy for companies to let different people who are all participating in a meeting all weigh in and immediately see what the group thinks. So I think if you find those ways to be really thoughtful about that and using some of even the most basic tools. So when you're scheduling a meeting with your team, think about what are the questions you're going to ask people? How are you going to ask them to respond? Will you say, if you think it's yes, put it in the chat. If you think it's no, put it in the chat so you can get everybody in a moment to weigh in without having to derail the meeting. If you could say, okay, give me a hands up if you've ever felt this way. Again, you can also build into the video conferencing platforms, polling and other ways that you can get input and then use this as a forum to continue those conversations.
I think that's very interesting. And I know you're a professional coach and also you're super good at it. Do you have any advice to the managers that who have to manage remotely?
Well, thank you for your compliment and your kind words. I'll say this both for managers, for managing other people, but also managers for themselves and for everyone. And that is, there's some research that was done in the United States around the whole concept of stress. So stress and anxiety. And what they found is that the stimulus that makes you feel stress, the stimulus is always the same. So some people, and I'll give you an example, think about going to Tokyo Disneyland, where I was lucky enough to go myself. Roller coasters, so the big attractions. Some people, that will give them stress. They'll be like, oh, I'm scared, I don't want to go on that. If they go on it, their heart will race. They'll lose their breath. Other people, that same stimuli of the roller coaster will be a fun thing for them. And they'll have excitement and feel joy from that. And so recognizing that the stimulus is the same, but how you react to it is different. And the reality is, if you can shift your mindset during this time to say, I'm not going to be what's called distressed by this or bad stress. I'm not going to let this make me feel like it will ruin my life and it will be the end. But I will look at this, as the term is in English, eustress, E-U stress, which is positive stress that actually gets you, it actually makes your heart beat and race a little bit faster, but in a positive way. You view it as a challenge as opposed to a threat. And then once you can just take that moment to say, okay, I'm feeling stress from this. My initial reaction may be to think of this as bad, but how can I make this a positive? How can I grow from this? How can this be a lesson learned that I will be better off in the future from? How can I look at this crisis as an opportunity? And so I think for everyone, if you can just recognize that mindset that, yes, this is different, and probably we will never go back to life exactly as it was before. So don't let this stress you out in a bad way, but think of it as a challenge and a wake up for the future. And how can you do things differently that will actually make life better in the end? And so certainly for the managers, once you understand that concept of you can view something stressful as good or bad. And in fact, if you view it as bad, you have a biochemical response to that that is not good, that will actually ensure that you will have a worse outcome than if you do view it positively. So for the managers of the world, think about that with your teams. And when you are coaching and managing your teams, and understand what is most stressful for them, and then talk to them about how can they find the positive? How can you grow the business from that? How can they not be afraid and let fear keep them from advancing, but rather lean into that and learn more about it? And there are some key topics and skills that many managers should be focusing on with their teams right now to help them through this. So things like negotiations, Most people have not been through negotiations training and coming up with a structured plan. But it's something that if it should continue in Japan, you will see people negotiating a lot more to try and amend contracts. Networking. So thinking about how do you build those meaningful, valuable relationships that can help you with time. So some people are stressed by networking. As a manager and a leader, talk to your team about how are they leveraging social media tools and the networks and the relationships that they already have today, and the ability to share out interesting articles with your perspective or POV with people to enhance and expand your networks during this challenging time rather than just shutting down.
Thank you. I see the communications matters a lot during this situation right now.
That is exactly right. And why it's so wonderful that you and your team are keeping everybody informed and involved through the shows that you've been doing on YouTube. So a huge kudos to you and to your team at Comexposium.
Yes. And we actually do like every morning meeting from 10 a.m. every day.
That is perfect and exactly right. We want to keep people engaged and involved.
Yeah, there's no agenda, but I think it works a lot.
That is wonderful.
Thank you. So time is almost up. It's so fast. Do you have any last comment to the Japanese audience?
Sure. The last thing I would say that obviously my passion project and purpose is not only helping companies and people feel more fearless at work and in life and understanding what are those fearless fundamentals, but advancing women in the workplace. We're excited that hopefully, as long as AdTech will happen in October, we'll be leading the first Advanced Women at Work Japan entire track, where we'll be focusing on gender equality and not only being able to help women be more assertive, clear, direct, and map out their path so that they can achieve their potential, but also to help male leaders understand what can they do to create a more inclusive, collaborative culture so that not only can everyone feel like it's good for humanity and fair, but most importantly, all of the research out there shows that companies that have more women in leadership are ones that are more innovative. They launch more new products. They have more revenue that comes from those new products, and they have a better bottom line. So I'm thrilled that we'll be able to do that work together. But one big challenge with coronavirus, if you do go the social distancing route, or even perhaps without that, is that a lot of the work that typically has to happen at home is now being relegated exclusively to women. So here in the United States, because schools are shut down and you can't have your laundry done by someone else and you can't have any cleaning done by anyone else, what's happening is the woman still has to do her job and get that done, but she is also then taking care of her children, and she's also doing all of the cooking because most restaurants are not open, and cleaning, and it is taking a really big toll on people. And so I would say to be really conscious of that. And as a business leader, how can you make sure that you are doing things that can support the women in your organization if they are taking on additional roles at home? Because we have seen that with other Eastern companies. Like I was on a call yesterday with two folks from Pakistan and Jordan, and they were saying that they are seeing most of the women on their teams are taking on a whole extra job between taking care of the children and the home front. So please be conscious of that and be sensitive to it. And there are a lot of great resources out there, like through the United Nations and their UN We Empower program, to help companies and the private sector think about how can they still create gender equitable companies during this time.
Think you just gave us super positive energy.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much, and I can't wait to see you in person. soon,
miss
hopefully.
Japan so much. Just hearing you talk makes me happy. And I can't wait to be there in Tokyo in October for AdTech.
Yes. Thank you very much, Jen. 本日中継ありがとうございました。こちらの記事、後ほど日本語でも記事公開させていただきたいと思いますので、そちらの方もぜひご覧ください。今日はありがとうございました。Okay, thank you so much, Jen, and have a nice... ありがとうございます。Have a nice day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Sayonara.